Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Theology in the Raw. I am here with my new friend, Monica. Now, you told me the different pronunciation. So, Monica
I did.
Zuniga?
That's right. You
Is
did
that it?
it.
Did I get it?
That's it.
Yeah?
Congrats.
Wasn't too
Killed it.
white?
No, not at all. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any Sunigas out there will be very proud if they're listening to hear how you pronounce
Because you
it.
want to say it's spelled Z-U-N. So, I mean, you want to say Zuniga, but Zuniga. How's that?
That's right.
All
Pronounce with an
right.
S. You got it. Yeah.
So Monica, we go back a few months. You were
Yes.
part of this video project that we hung out with. Did we? Yeah. That I've been
Oh yeah,
doing, and man, we
24/7.
spent. I mean, all day, every
Yeah.
day, you and the film crew and everything together, and I sat there for
Yeah.
hours listening to you speak into what will be end up being lots of youth lives about Jesus, about life, about all kinds of stuff. So thanks for
Yeah.
being on Theology in the Raw.
Of course. I'm so excited. I love what you guys are doing. Such an
Yeah.
honor to be a part in any way. And so I'm excited to
Yeah.
chat with you a little bit more about just my
Yeah.
story and what God's doing and just the things that he's really using you to lead in the
Yeah.
next generation. And so thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored to have you on. So yeah, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, and then yeah, we do want to get into some specifics about your story, and we'll just go from there.
For sure. So I am based out of Dallas, Texas, Texas girl, born and raised. I got to Dallas by way of running in college and from a small town outside of Amarillo, Texas called Hereford. Maybe one listener on here will know where that's at. But yeah, just grew up in the church, very stable home life. And then just knew from a young age I had a call to ministry in some capacity. And so my parents really encouraged that. And after college, I had some Nineveh years and just ran from the call upon my life, ran from the Lord, which is a huge part of my story that we'll talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back to my faith and really pursued an authentic relationship with the Lord, that's just really where the call upon my life to really invest in the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the power of storytelling to set people free, which is a huge part of the ministry that I do through leading women and speaking. And I just really believe in raising up the next generation for the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so passionate about lifting the voices of different people and creating space for individuals that normally don't have a platform in this Christian
Mm-hmm.
world. And God has just been really faithful to put me in places and positions with different organizations to be able to do that full time. And so
Mm-hmm.
my heart is for women, for the next gen, for really creating space for voices to be heard and for really individuals that listen to other people talk really feel connected. Like, oh, I'm hearing myself on the other side of
Mm-hmm.
the screen, or I'm seeing myself, or I'm feeling represented in the space of Christianity today. So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Now you let's go back to your high school, college, well, your college years, because you had an experience
Mm-hmm.
that and given the title, I haven't titled this episode yet as we're talking, but
Yeah, yeah.
people listening will have already seen the title. So I remember hearing your story and the experience that you went through and how you've both obviously the negative ramifications of that, but then seeing the power of the
Mm-hmm.
gospel woven into that is just it's stunning, and yet
Yeah.
also tragic. It's hard to. It's I hate speaking about somebody's tragic experience in positive terms, but in a sense, God has used this in your life in really powerful
Mm-hmm.
ways. So, if you
For
wouldn't
sure.
mind, yeah, I
Yeah.
would love to hear you expand on that.
Absolutely. So it was my senior year of college. So I was pretty much done and graduated, and it was the summer. In between, I had a redshirt year for running, so I actually ran one more year
Okay.
in my master's. But it was the summer in between, and I was just had faced a lot of disappointment back to back in my life, and did not really know how to handle or navigate through that disappointment. I specifically felt disappointed by God in certain
Mm-hmm.
areas, and so that's just something that is like a taboo thing to talk about in the church. And I felt a lot of shame for feeling the disappointment. And I think I was just in such a low place in my life. It was disappointment with my personal life, with my career path,
Mm-hmm.
with my running, like so many things that really shaped my identity. And as a result, I just found myself partying a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not the party girl. Like I didn't drink till I was 21. I was like little Miss Perfect Christian girl growing up in
Mm-hmm.
church. Like, was it virgin? Like had kissed a few guys, but like
Mm-hmm.
was just so committed to living my life according to what I just knew the word of God said. And so in this season, I found myself going out partying in Dallas, different clubs, and alcohol just became such an escape for me. It became a numbing mechanism, became, in a lot of ways, I could just adopt a different identity when I went
Mm-hmm.
out. You know, I could become the cute, hot girl that
Mm-hmm.
I just never felt like I was. And so I just remember believing the lie that I had control over my life, that like I could go out and party and have fun and be in these environments and meet people and have zero consequence. And I think that's really one of the first lies that like the enemy tells us about entering into things that are not God's design. And drunkenness like is what I was doing, which is
Mm-hmm.
not God's design for alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew what was right and wrong, but I really felt like I was in control. And so it was a summer night, and I just remember hanging out with my girlfriends, and I knew that night that something was off and wrong. I could just feel it. Like God still gave me enough like discernment to understand that something was off that night. And I ended up being drugged by a guy and a drink he gave me, and I don't remember anything after like from getting to this certain bar to where when I like came back into consciousness, like I was at his house on his bed,
Mm-hmm.
he was ripping my clothes off, and I'm, you know, a 22-year-old girl, a virgin,
Mm-hmm.
have never been in this situation in my life, and there I am in this space, and so I think you're frozen, so I want to make sure that it's not me.
You're frozen on my end, but I can hear you fine. I think let's just keep going. It might kick back in. Oh, there you are. There you are.
There you are.
Yeah.
Was it me or was it you? I couldn't
On
tell.
my
I
end,
could
you
still
were
hear
frozen.
myself.
It could have been my. I have
Okay.
terrible internet, so it could have been probably was me. But keep going.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
keep.
stopped because I didn't want to mess it up, but
Yeah,
I could hear myself, but I just couldn't see you, so I
yeah,
didn't want to continue. But I'll just pick back up. So I
yeah.
was out with friends, um, and that night I just knew that something was off. Like I could feel it in my spirit, but I was in this just routine of
Mm-hmm.
going out, drinking, numbing a lot of the pain that I was feeling through
Mm-hmm.
drinking, and I was drugged by a guy. I believe he roofied me, put something in my drink. I remember going to the bar that night, and then I have no recollection of anything else until waking up on his bed, and he was ripping my clothes off. I'm 22. I'm a virgin. I
Mm-hmm.
was in total panic, and I just remember like telling him and yelling at him like, "Hey, I'm a virgin. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, please don't do this." And I was like calling out for help. I realized I was all by myself. Like, there was no one there to help me. And I ended up losing my virginity that night through rape. And I didn't have my phone on me. Like, I had nothing on me. And after everything, I remember just going into his bathroom, like sitting on the floor and just immediately agreeing with the lie that it was my fault. That because I chose to deal with disappointment and pain in my life by numbing it through alcohol, and because I
Mm-hmm.
was in this cycle of sin, that I deserved the rape, that like that was God's punishment on my life. And he didn't take me home till the next morning. And I just remember choosing that morning that I would never tell a soul, that it would be a secret I would keep, that I would be shamed for it, that
Mm-hmm.
no one would understand, that every person that knew me and loved me and knew the Lord would judge me. And so I held on to that lie, and I held on to this secret that what had happened to me for about 2.5 years. And the enemy really used that lie that no one would understand, that it was my fault, to keep me in captivity during that time. And
Mm-hmm.
it really led me down a darker hole of more alcohol, to numb the pain, to numb the memory. It led to me just dating horrible guys. Like, just, I then began to believe the lie, like, if I just get married and I'm not single, then like I won't feel dirty anymore. Like, because I felt so dirty from the rape. And I just was in this darkness all by myself and did not feel like there was a safe place for me to talk about what I was going through. And that's a huge reason why I even accepted like working with you guys on this project, is because I'm so passionate now about creating safe places for people to talk about their darkness and their trauma. Because scripture says once something is brought to the light, like it loses its power. And it was about, 2.5 years later when I finally told somebody. I told a friend, and this friend happened to be a really trusted, sound person who immediately was like, hey, that was not your fault. Yes, you may have been living in sin. Yes, you may have, drank and chose to go out that night, but God did not punish you by allowing that to happen. That's not God's heart. That's not his character. It's not who he is. And it took me about a year to really untangle the lies that I had believed about God's character and the lies I had believed about what it meant to follow God. Like, I believed that God was an angry father that was judging me, that was condemning me, that didn't forgive me for mistakes I had made. And I came to realize that the more I talked about it, the more I went to counseling, the more I was able to really process the trauma that I went through, I was able to see like God's heart really be broken for me in that. And like a true father would be devastated that his daughter had to go through something like that. But again, as we touched on earlier in this conversation, God works everything for his good. Like, he redeems everything. He makes everything brand new. And a huge part of my story and testimony is that I would not be who I am today were it not for that part of my story. I wouldn't be passionate about freeing other women in this way. I wouldn't have this understanding of God's grace and love and know his character for myself. And so I'm not necessarily grateful. I don't wish trauma upon anybody whatsoever, but I do know what the word of God means when it says that he works all things for our good. And what the enemy meant for evil, God will turn and use for good. And those things have become really testimonies and pillars now of how I lead and live my life. And I lead my life with just as much purity as I did before I was a virgin. And I am made new in that. And I have such confidence in that. And I'm able to proudly say that now at 32, and 10 years later, be able to walk in that freely and not have the shame that I was carrying because of that experience and encounter I had.
Thank you for being vulnerable and honest. And I can only imagine how your story has helped others to have the courage to, talk about their own. Do you, I mean, I've seen some percentages on people who have been through either some sort of sexual abusive situation or full on rape, as in your case. Is that, do you come across a lot of people that have been a victim and just have never had space to talk about it? Is that so much more common than we realize? I mean,
it's so common. I think one of the things that I've been open to, like the reality of since my story and like really creating space for other women to share, is that I think I read a while back, it's 1 in 3 women are a victim of sexual abuse of some kind. So it's very common.
That's what I've heard.
Women in the church are very quiet about it. So I found that if I create an environment where women are open to talk and I share my story, I have almost half the room come to me and talk to me about their specific story that they've never told anyone. And even more eye-opening is, like, I think a lot of people assume, I think it's more common now, but especially when I first started sharing my story, a lot of women experience trauma of obviously like child abuse is a huge one for women, but beyond that, a lot of pornography for
Mm-hmm.
women now is a huge issue. And being exposed to that at a young age and that really holding them captive and a really shameful thing that they're extremely ashamed to talk about
Yeah.
because it's really more of a man's issue in the church where I have found the more I've talked about my story and my journey, I've seen a lot of
Mm-hmm.
more women open up about their struggle with porn. And the percentages on that are much higher than you would
Yeah.
think. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would say every time I have been in a room, there are several women who have
Mm-hmm.
had a long time struggle with it, similar to men. And it
Yeah.
just is something that, again, is a taboo thing that we assume women are not struggling with.
Yeah.
Or but I've just found like those areas are very common.
Yeah. No, I've seen, I don't have the percentages in front of me, but they're about twice as high as what people would expect. I want to say something like 60% of guys and 40% of women. It's something like
Yeah.
that. Either, have habitual porn use or some sort of exposure. And even it's hard to
Yeah.
measure too, because you're dealing with people, their self testimony. And also, as we, on this project that we worked on, distinguishing between periodic, habitual, and addictive porn use.
Yes. Mhm.
I thought that was helpful. I know we talked to Jason about that, and
Mhm.
yeah, and that what that does to you, especially for a girl who her first anybody, but I mean their first exposure
Yeah.
to sexuality is porn. I don't.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, that's like,
Yeah.
and from what I've
Hmm.
heard through studies, I have to qualify that. It's getting more and more violent, more and more degrading, more and more just
Yes.
dehumanizing. That kind of porn. So when somebody sees that as this is what sex is,
Hmm.
and then either guys expect that from girls, or girls feel like
Yep.
that's what sex is, so I
What they
need to
have
do
to
these
be. Yeah.
things. That's crazy.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
When someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I have my own story, and here's what happened," how do you walk
Mhm.
with them through that? Um,
Yeah. I think it really depends on the context of where she's talking to me
yeah.
and where we're able to really interact. But the women in my circle and influence that have really come to me and struggled with these things, I obviously want to provide a safe place and be a friend to them, be a resource for them, a mentor for them. But one of the things I highly recommend, regardless, is some sort of trauma counseling
Mm-hmm.
and um, something for them to really work with a professional to walk through the trauma that they've been through.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think as something that I've found is that as Christians, at least how I grew up in the church, and some people may resonate this who are around my age, or even if you're younger listening, the church really does do a great job of outlining like this is like the black and white areas of
Right.
God's word. Like this is what it means to follow God. But the gray areas, which I know you
Mm-hmm.
touch on a lot, which we've talked about, of like, well, what about like when I am exploring my sexuality?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do I do about that? Or
Mm-hmm.
what if someone takes my virginity from me and now I've opened up this floodgate to sexual desire that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily want to have opened? What do
Mm-hmm.
I do about that? Or I'm even like, I think I'm attracted to the same sex. What do I do about that? Or if someone of the same sex abuses them as a child and then they're struggling with those thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times when something is done against you, against your will
Mm-hmm.
specifically, I think we don't, in the church world, I had this perception of like, well, I sinned. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I viewed my rape as sin, not as a traumatic experience where my virginity was taken from me
Mm-hmm.
against my will.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and
Yeah.
that is what rape is.
Yes.
And it's an abusive, traumatic experience for people. And I, because I grew up in the church, viewed it as, well, this is sin. God
Mm-hmm.
hates sin. Therefore, he hates me. Like God's word is black and white about sex before marriage. And I had sex before marriage. Like
Wow.
I sinned, like I'm sinful. And so I usually try to communicate that in the most clear way of like separate your sin from the trauma. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and know that like because of sin and brokenness that's entered the world, sometimes sin gets put on you, but it wasn't sin you willfully participated in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference of like when I'm willfully getting drunk and going out to party, I'm sinning. Like I'm choosing to sin against the temple that God's given me and against his word that says to not drink to drunkenness, you know? When I had my virginity taken from me, someone was sinning against me, like using the brokenness of the world that broke me and affected me. But I wasn't participating in that sin. I wasn't willfully trying to sin in that way. And so I always encourage people to really separate and identify, like, if it's especially physical and sexual abuse, like it's trauma against you and your body. It's a product of the brokenness of our world. And it's so important to be able to process that with a professional, to be able to have a safe place to talk about things. Many times, for me, it was a stranger. For many times, it could be family members or neighbors or people that they knew, or stepfathers, you know, like stepmothers, you know, many people that you're connected to. So it'd be really tangled to be able to try to communicate about that if they're still in your life. But if you're old enough and able to see a professional, and if not, to really identify and clearly, you know, just clearly make it clear to them, like God's heart was never for this to happen to you. And God's heart and desire, like, is to protect you as a father. And this is his character. And I just highly encourage them to study the word of God for themselves, to study the character of God for themselves, and to know that who he is not someone that's trying to, like, he's not trying to hurt us, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that that main distinguishing factor of, like, if you're abused, like, that's trauma against you.
Right.
And that's the brokenness of man. That's the sinful nature of man. But that's separate than you willfully sinning.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, being able to see that helped me really forgive myself, help me forgive my abuser, help me really, like, forgive God. Honestly, I was angry at God. I thought he made it happen to me. I thought he was angry at me. And being able to go to counseling and process that too really helped me process just a lot of the anger and the emotions that I was feeling, that I just didn't feel safe with anybody in my world at the time. And so many people will talk to me because I'm safe in the moment because of my own vulnerability, but I may not be able to walk with them for a long period of time to process the rest of that trauma. So,
yeah. How have you seen women in particular who have been a victim of sexual abuse? What have you seen that do to their, what are the lingering effects to their view of sex and sexuality? And I'm sure it's not a one size fits all, but I can imagine that,
yeah.
at least I know with, hurt people, you know, that phrase, that people who have been victims, sometimes they can kind of embody that, or it manifests itself in different ways. Have you seen that in the people you've walked with or in
For
your own life?
sure. I think the biggest thing is that it just creates this wavelength in your brain. At least for me, it did. And the people I know, that's how men receive love, is through sex, like, long story short, and through sexual acts. And I had never felt that way about men before. Like, guys I had dated, boyfriends I had in high school and college that were good guys. I never felt the pressure to do anything sexual. Yet once that happened to me, and once I felt like that's how all men were, it really just created that lie in my mind. And I've noticed that with other women who are victims as well, is if you're not really working on your healing and you haven't fully been freed from that, you will, like, fall into this lie and believe that that's what love is. Like, that in order to show affection, like, even if you don't want to, you need to have sex with this person. Like, in order to show that you care about them, like, doing sexual things that maybe you don't want to do. And I fell victim to that in relationships after, and had no desire to do it, but just really felt this pressure of, like, well, this is what guys want, and this is all I'm worth. And I need to just do that. And so, and I think it also, like, I don't know how many studies have been done, but I've seen this with girls who haven't worked through things. I've seen this with myself, is that like I would tend to attract these horrible guys
Really?
that did want that, like that was what I was drawn to, was almost the same like characteristics of an abuser, because that's what I felt I was worth almost.
Mm-hmm.
Was like, well, this is my value now. And so I'm only good for like a guy that's like right here. But like I
Yeah.
can't be good enough for someone that is going to respect me, like going to value me. And it
Mm-hmm.
took time for me. It really did. I would say it wasn't until I was probably 27, 28, probably 28. I mean, that I really felt free from that and
Wow.
felt confident and felt like I don't have to, like, my body is not a means to an end
Mm-hmm.
for someone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have more to offer in a relationship. And um, I think that that's, again, just a lie that gets planted. And I've seen that especially with younger girls who were of abuse. A girlfriend of mine that I discipled for years was abused as a child. And up until like a year before she got married, like met her husband and got married, like she just thought that's how all men were, and just almost threw herself on men that she dated because she was so used to that kind of, like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're for. Like that's what you're made for. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of lies tied to it, that I think, again, take true time to untangle and unravel. That I found I'm very independent. I'm very much do it on my own, but I realized this is something I can't do by myself.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get the proper help to break
Yeah.
out of the mindset that I was in.
What's crazy to me is I mean, given how high of a percentage it is that women have gone through this, and especially if you're raised in the church, that there's so much extra shame surrounding it. There's few
Yep.
spaces, if any, to talk about. How are we not having these conversations more? I mean, if one third, you're okay,
Yeah.
you're a pastor, you're preaching a sermon, you got 1,000 people in front of you, half are women, so 500.
Mhm.
One third, we're talking 150, maybe 200
Yeah.
of the women have been through
Hmm.
something as tragic as this,
Yeah.
most of whom have never worked through it, all of whom are going to have lasting, or if they haven't worked through it, have lasting damage and
Yep.
effects. Damage is the wrong
Hmm.
word, but like it's has ripple effects in their life.
Yes.
Like that, it seems kind of urgent that we somehow create space in the church to have these conversations. How are we not? How have I
Yeah.
never? I don't know. Like
I
it's
don't know. I agree. No, I 100% agree. It's too taboo. And I know a lot of friends who have walked into marriages not working through this, and it's
yeah.
affected their sex life and marriage
Oh.
tremendously because they're not able to know intimacy apart from abuse. And so
Yeah.
these are also things that I don't think people really talk about and have gone through the healing of understanding. And I think one of the things that I'm very well aware of is that, like, it is still hard for me at this age to disassociate intimacy with abuse. It
Hmm.
is just hard. Like, I wish I could say that that was the only time I was raped. I was raped a couple more times in a series of the next 2 years by other men.
Are you
And like,
serious?
yes, I had it. It was multiple times. It was like a cycle that I was in for a season of just being around the wrong guys. Like, I'm telling you, it was like I was stuck in this thing. I felt like I was drawn to them like moths to a flame, unknowingly, but it was like the trauma that I was not dealing with that was pushing me closer to this type of man. And that seemed safe, but like wasn't safe. And so I think people also are maybe unaware of the reality that like one rape could turn into more. And it is something that, I mean, most of the women I know have been raped once have been raped more than once. Like, and it's something that just psychologically really messes with you. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel totally free. I don't feel like that person. I know I'm made new, but I still am like very aware of the fact that intimacy will look different for me in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And will be something that I know could potentially still trigger me, because that's what I associate into what I've like known intimacy to be with.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like other people may know intimacy to be like this great, beautiful thing
Mm-hmm.
that they had a great
Yeah.
experience losing their virginity. For me, that has not been the case. I mean, I've never had intimacy with someone and felt like it was a good thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think those are things too that are, I know other women who have been victims of sexual abuse, who entered into a marriage, who had horrible sex lives, like
Yeah.
who, a friend of mine who ended up getting divorced last year, and their sex life was a huge part of their issue, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it was due to her past trauma too, that she just never worked through. And Christ following, love the Lord, good people.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe there is a huge missed opportunity within the church to provide avenues for people to really work through the
Mm-hmm.
healing of that and to have safe spaces to talk about it, because our world is so sexualized, it's out of control. And it's everywhere else in our face, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And there is, I think even watching porn is trauma. It's trauma to your mind
Mm-hmm.
to then make you agree with something that's not true in God's design. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we're really trying to live like according to God's word and to be free from these things and bring heaven to earth, I think part of that conversation has to involve the reality of the sexual
Yeah.
brokenness that we live in. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's I never thought about it from this angle, but the such high percentage of women who have been victims, it makes me think too, what about the same percentage of guys who are doing this? Like, are there a lot more
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
abusers walking around than we realize? Like, it's like, I
Oh,
mean,
for sure.
it's not just one
Yeah.
guy doing all, I mean, that's crazy to
Mm-hmm.
think. And then I think we'd be naive to think, oh, but that's outside the church. I don't think so, man. Like,
Yeah. No, 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 it's not, unfortunately.
and especially
I know.
as
Yeah.
guys maybe have been a victim themselves of something, again, hurt
Mm-hmm.
people, they have their own
Yep.
story of probably being a victim
Mm-hmm.
at some point, many of them at least, so they haven't healed
Yep.
from that, and then they might turn in and do it
Yep.
to some. I mean, that's that cycle. I just feel like this is
Yeah.
urgent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah. No, I think it definitely is. I do think more and more people are, I think things like the Me Too
yeah,
movement has helped in some way, but I do believe the sad part to me is that the world is moving in this direction, but the church should be
yeah,
leading in this direction.
yeah,
And so what does it look like in our Christian spaces and the church to really lead in this conversation, to recognize that like the Me Too movement is all about like, let's bring men down. Like they're all going to fall. And are these men bad
yeah,
people? Sure. Are they living in sin? Absolutely. Are they Christ followers? I don't know. But when it comes to the church, like I know there are men who I know personally from just stories of people that I know who have had incidents with men who are on staff at churches, you know,
yeah,
who abuse them in some way and hurt them in some way. If those men are on staff at the church, like the church can find a way to address it and still honor the identity of a man
mm-hmm.
and allow him to get help, and to still honor the woman who
Yeah,
dealt with that trauma and walk with her through that. And I think there are ways that the church can lead in it to really bring wholeness to the body and honor one another versus the narrative
mm-hmm.
of like any person who does this is the worst person and they deserve to lose
Hmm.
everything. And in reality, like, yeah, that's very intense and extreme. That's our culture. But the word of
Mm-hmm.
God says we're made in God's image and that every person has inherent value. And the word of God also tells us that sin entered into the world
Mm-hmm.
and made it broken. And we all are innately born sinners.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us fall privy to things that we would never imagine we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that includes people that abuse women sexually.
Yeah,
And I don't think they're too far gone from God's like redemptive power and healing. And just like you said, it's probably something in their past that led to that, that's making them act out this way, or just a situation that they've had that they just did. You know, they
mm-hmm.
just maybe one off did it and it became something they continue to do. But people who hurt people are in a lot of pain. And the pain stems from a deeper root
Mm-hmm.
that we just don't always address. And so I think there is a way to biblically do it beautifully and to provide space and conversations for that. And I think, I mean, that's a huge part of my passion and why I do
Mhm.
what I do is I want to always create that space and allow people to feel that they're not an anomaly or that there's not anything wrong with them.
Yeah.
And that they can openly share
Mhm.
and still receive the the
Yeah.
acceptance that I think we're all afraid we're going to be rejected
Totally.
for when it comes to these topics.
Monica, what are some? I just thought of this right now. What are some like um, triggers, for lack of better terms, that you experience? Let's just say specifically in the church culture, Christian culture, that might be probably shared by again the 1/3 of women who have been in some kind of sexual abuse situation. What are some things the church does, kind of maybe just ignorantly, blindly, that is maybe not helping um, the
Yeah.
situation? Does that make sense? I mean, is that a valid
Oh, yeah, for
question? And
sure.
yeah.
I think one of the major ones is I wouldn't have said this when I was in high school because I was a virgin, and I was like saving myself to a marriage,
Mm-hmm.
yes. But like for people who have endured sexual abuse when they were younger, I have heard that that's very triggering to like go to a youth service
Mm.
and it be all about purity. Like it's purity weekend. And we're talking about saving yourself for marriage.
Mm.
Well, actually, I've already like been sexually abused. I'm not a virgin, like, and now we're having this talk about saving myself.
Mm.
Like I
Wow.
have heard so many women say like the shame that they have felt in that conversation and around that. And like they can't say like, that's where it really starts of like if these young girls are victims of sexual abuse and they're going to a youth group and it's all about purity and saving yourself till marriage and they're having conversations and when I was younger it was like we're going to sign this thing and commit ourselves
Mm-hmm.
to like wait till we're married to have sex and I participated in that and I look back and I'm like there were definitely girls, there was no way there were not girls who were sexually abused
Yeah.
that were in that probably awkwardly signing this petition and don't even have the
Ugh.
room to say, hey, I actually am not a virgin. Like something's happened to me, I think those things, sexual abuse, like I have not a rare story in rape, but a rare story at my age. I
Mm-hmm.
was much older and it happens to women much younger.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that that's something that I'm grateful that my childhood was preserved in that way. But at the same time, the women I've talked to, it happened when they were young, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think having those purity talks, those purity weekends, I think really creating space to say like, hey, we're well aware that like abuse happens at young
Mm-hmm.
ages, and framing it in a way where it doesn't put shame on the
Yeah.
person when having those conversations. I think that's really one of the major ones I can
Mm-hmm.
think of. I think outside of that, I think it's just the unspoken things of like, feeling like you have to be at a certain place to be successful, to
Mm-hmm.
be married. I think single moms who have maybe had a kid out of wedlock
Mm-hmm.
might feel like they're not qualified for certain things because they're not
Mm-hmm.
married or in a relationship. And I think too, a lot of things that can be triggering as well. And this is a huge part of your ministry, which I love, is a good friend of mine. He grew up struggling with same sex attraction, grew up in
Mm-hmm.
the church, like a very creative guy,
Mm-hmm.
like is walking in freedom of that now, but growing up just felt like there was no space to talk about it and felt shamed for even like wanting to do stuff with the girls and
Hmm.
wanting to like be a part of decorating the space for church and not moving tables,
Yeah.
and he was shamed and looked down upon, and when he did try to have a conversation with someone in the church about it, was instantly told that's a sin, like there's something wrong with you.
Oh man.
So that's not around abuse, but it's still a
Yeah.
triggering thing. I think it led him down a path
Mm-hmm.
that was really negative for a lot of his life and could have been avoided if there was just a space to have a conversation about it because he was different in his
Mm-hmm.
expression. And so I think too, there are times when kids who have been abused are probably going to be more affectionate, maybe touch in weird ways because that's what they
Hmm.
think is normal. And so I think having more awareness of that with
Mm-hmm.
staff too, and not just saying, "Hey, don't do that,"
Yeah, right.
don't hug me like that, um, don't touch her that way, or don't touch him like that. That's good and all, but there's a deeper issue probably there, and a lot of the things that I think are communicated can feel like shame put
Mm-hmm.
on you when really that's only feels like shame because you're maybe in some sort of abusive thing or wrestling through something that no one knows about. And so I think there just could be a heightened sensitivity
Yeah.
in that.
I mean, it's just in general, like when you're a leader, a Christian leader, and you're giving a talk. I mean, this is true for so many different things. And I've had to learn this the hard way over the years. I mean, I'm a white straight guy, and I forget, and who hasn't been a victim of abuse, who hasn't had, I've been through a divorce, but I've had
Mm-hmm.
a fairly vanilla life.
Yeah.
And it's taken me years to understand that there's a good percentage of people out there that have not had that kind of trajectory. So I mean, just that general, especially if you're a leader, if you're speaking in front of people
Mm-hmm.
or leading people, when you look out at the sea of faces, just assume that there's a lot of just diverse brokenness out there, and pain,
Yeah.
and trauma, and
Mm-hmm.
people that haven't been
Yep.
healed from stuff
Yeah.
that they need to be. Well, Monica, thank you so much for your work that you do. I'm so excited. I just like love the fact that you are there, that you're this next gen lead, like you're helping this next generation to
Thank
follow
you.
Jesus more faithfully. And my generation, I'm one generation ahead of you, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
we've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm glad to see people like you learning from our mistakes. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your honesty and
Oh,
your vulnerability. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Hope
of
this
course.
conversation helps many people out there to maybe find healing in their own life. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Thanks,
thanks
Preston.
thanks for being on the show. Take care.
You
All right.
too.